if you are anything like me, there are certain authors that you don't have to think twice about buying their new book. No questions asked, no hesitations, you don't even know what the book is about. Take my money. Yes, today I'm sharing my auto-buy authors. And of course, recommending some must-read books. So whether you're looking for something new to read or you're just curious about what's on my list, this video got you covered. Let's dive in. Let's kick off with Susanna Clarke, an author whose work feels like you're stepping into a whole new dimension. For me, it started with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Now, from the moment I picked up this book, I knew this was going to be something different and something special. The thing about Clarke's writing is that it is so immersive. Yes, it is all about worlds with magic, but I'm here to believe them. And what makes Susanna Clarke an author-by author for me is her ability to blend intricate world building with very believable and human characters. She weaves folklore and history and mythology all together so seamlessly that her worlds feel both intricate and lived in. Her stories truly feel timeless, and the first time I picked up Jonathan Strange, I thought that it was a classic, that it was a book written long ago. And I truly love her style. It is, on the one hand, quite literate, and on the other hand, it is quite accessible. Yes, Jonathan Strange might be a thick book, but it never bores. So yeah, of course, top recommendations. Let's kick off with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It is alternate fiction, historical fiction and fantasy all blend together. It has intrigue, it has complex characters, and it has a very unique magic system. And it is set in the 19th century in England, which is quite refreshing for magical fantasy novels. Yes, it is a dense book, but it is a very rewarding book. It's a slow burn story with many layers of details, and this is truly one for the fantasy lovers. If you're sick of your swords and shields and spells, well, this might be the book that changes it all up for you. But there's also the other book, Piranesi. And Piranesi truly swept me off my feet. It is something totally different, but equally magical. It is a quiet, introspective story about a man living in a labyrinth of endless statues. It is part mystery, who is this man and who are those people that come into his labyrinth from time to time. And it is part meditation on wonder and on solitude. It is something truly unique. It won Women's Prize for Fiction, and if that's not enough for you, it did make #1 on my top 10 books that I read last year. And what's really unique about these two books is how different they are. They are different in style, in tone, in story, and yet they are unmistakably hers. She takes her time with her work, but up till now the wait has always been worth it. And as a little Susanna Clarke bonus, I was in the bookshop the other day and I found this little book. Now, I had never heard of it. It is called The Woods at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke, and it is said to be an enchanting Christmas story. Since Susanna Clarke is an author-by-author of me, I had to pick this one up. Haven't read it just yet, but this is a little something special for the holidays. It's a beautiful little book, it is richly illustrated, and I'll definitely let you know what my thoughts on it are. And then, of course, we have to talk Terry Pratchett, who's not just a fantasy writer, a satire author, he's a legend. His books aren't just stories, they are entire worlds you want to live in. I think the first time I read a Discworld novel, I must have been about 12, 13, and I was immediately hooked. And I'm still today. Pratchett's writing is both hilarious, insightful, and very humane. What makes Pratchett stand out for me is his ability to blend comedy with razor-sharp satire on humanity. Yes, his books might be laugh out loud funny, but they sneak up on you with morality, with criticism, and what it is all about being a human. Or a dwarf. Or a troll. But mostly humans. Whether he's writing about witches or anthropomorphical dead, he has this way of making fantastical things very relatable. For me, his works are truly timeless, and every reread I do of a Pratchett novel is a chance to discover new things. But where do you start? If it comes to the Discworld series, I have an entire video about that one. I'll link it somewhere up here. A quick top 3. If you're interested in the City Watch series, I would start at the beginning there with Guards. It is the perfect introduction to Discworld with this ragtag bunch of guards and their commander Vimes. And Vimes is one of my favorite fantasy characters of all times. It's clever, it's chaotic, and it is one of the most beloved storylines that Pratchett ever wrote. And then there's the Witches series with Wyrd Sisters, and if you're a fan of Shakespeare, then you'll absolutely love this one. It's a parody on both Macbeth and Hamlet with these 3 witches who meddle in royal politics. It is satire, it is funny, it is razor sharp, witty. It is a delight to read. Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Ogg are simply unforgettable characters. And then there's the Industrial Revolution series that starts off with Going Postal. This is one of Pratchett's later works and probably one of its sharpest satirical works. We follow Moist von Lipwig, who is this conman who is forced to reform the postal service or literally die trying. It's hilarious, it is high stakes, it is satire commentary on bureaucracy and how we communicate, and Moist is one of my all-time favorites in the Discworld series. Moist is hilarious, he is deeply flawed, and his stories are some of the best world-building Pratchett has ever written. And yeah, the Discworld series spans over 41 novels, but don't let that discourage you. If you're not really ready to start with a new series or even a sub-series, then there are some great standalone novels as well. Nation, for example. The silliness gets toned down a little bit in this one, but it gives more room for a very heartwarming and humane story about culture and how our society works. If you're looking for biting satire, if you're looking for heartwarming stories, if you're looking for very relatable and unforgettable characters, then Pratchett is your go-to. If you haven't already discovered Pratchett's work, then you're in for a treat. And if you have, let me know down below. I want to know who is your favorite Discworld character. Mine is of course Moist. And then I want to showcase R.F. Kuang, an author who at many times have left me in awe and sometimes in tears. For me, it all started with The Poppy War, a fantasy series set in an oriental setting, which was something totally new for me. And from the moment I finished this series, I knew I was going to follow her career anywhere she would go. And boy, the places she did go. She's one of those writers who combines brutal honesty with a great storytelling and keen intellect. And what makes R.F. Kuang an author for me is probably her fearlessness. She doesn't shy away from the difficult topics like colonialism and privilege and the dark side of academia. And every time she seems to manage to weave these themes in a great story with some very, very flawed and human characters. But she's also not afraid to just write what she wants to write. Yes, The Poppy Wars was a fantasy series, and then we had Dark Academia with Babel, and then all of a sudden it was a contemporary satire with Yellowface. 3 totally different genres, but each time her writing remained razor sharp and powerful and something I totally was here for. And yeah, of course, if you're into fantasy, do pick up those Poppy War series. It is inspired by Chinese history and mythology, and it is this dark, very dark fantasy series about a girl called Rin as we follow her through military academy. It's a story about power, about revenge, and the very atrocity that war can be. And this series does not pull its punches. It is raw, it is dark, and it goes places you might not want it to go. But it is very powerful, and it is still one of the best fantasy series in its genre that I've read up to this day. And then there's Babel, a 19th century dark academia mix between historical fiction, a bit of fantasy, and a lot of alternate history. It is a masterclass in how to write fiction that is both intellectual and emotionally gripping. It delves into themes of colonialism, of language, and of identity. It's a deeply personal and political book, and if you like books that challenge you to think upon the more difficult themes, then Babel is absolutely for you. And then there's Yellowface, a contemporary satirical novel about cultural appropriation, the publishing industry and social media. It follows an author who steals the manuscript of her now dead friend, and it explores the whole process of putting it out there as her own and culturally appropriating everything around it. It is both darkly funny and very close to reality, and again R.F. Kuang doesn't pull any punches, and I thought it was brilliant. It's no wonder that I have full-length reviews of these books, so I'll link them up here if you want to know more about them. But yeah, if you are a fan of stories that are both very intellectual, thought-provoking and emotional, then R.F. Kuang is an author to explore. I'm really looking forward to see what the next R.F. Kuang book will be. And then we'll just bring it down a notch and explore an author whose work is a warm hug for the soul. I'm talking James Norbury. His books might be quieter than some on this list, but they are no less impactful. And if you haven't discovered his beautifully crafted, beautifully illustrated stories just yet, then you're in for a treat, because James Norbury, I love his books. For me, James Norbury's books speak directly to the heart. His books are simple but profound, and his beautiful illustrations go ever so well hand in hand with timeless wisdoms. These books are about life and kindness and resilience. These books aren't just stories. These are companions in rough times when you need something or someone to remind you of the beauty of life. I think we have about all of his books twice in this house, once in English, once in Dutch, because I read them with my 11-year-old son and we bond over them. These books are truly universal. For me, it started with Big Panda and Tiny Dragon, and it was nothing short but magical. We follow two friends on a philosophical journey throughout the seasons. We have the Big Panda and the Tiny Dragon. The illustrations are truly stunning, and when these two converse, it feels like a meditation on the simple things of life. It is one of those books you want to keep on a coffee table or a nightstand and just page through and pick one or two illustrations and little dialogues and just think about them. And they bring me peace. And while Big Panda and Tiny Dragon might be a bit of a series, he also has excellent standalone books like The Cat Who Taught Zen or The Dog Who Followed the Moon. And both of them are breathtakingly beautiful and very inspiring. And I had the privilege to meet James Norbury just a few months ago, and we had a talk on his works and where his inspiration comes from. And I could tell that these books are not just deeply personal for him, but they are meant to be deeply personal for the reader as well. No matter who you are, you'll find something relatable, you'll find something that speaks to you in his books. And with the upcoming holidays, these books make for some excellent gifts. If you want to give a book but you don't know which one and you're doubting if you should give a bookstore voucher, pick one of his books instead. I guarantee you the recipient will love it, just as you will love the books by James Norbury. And my final author by now is one I blame you guys for. My Claire Keegan journey started about a year ago when you guys kept on recommending her work to me, and I finally picked one up. And I was suddenly treated to a masterclass in less is more storytelling. She truly is the queen of the novella and the short story. Every book might be brief, but it packs a serious punch. If you haven't read any of her books, I guarantee you that this is an author that will make you fall in love with the short story and the novella form all over again. And the reason why she has become an author by author for me is twofold. First, she has this ability to distill human life. She can capture those quiet moments of life, the moments of grief, of loneliness, but also of happiness. She truly makes them feel monumental. And she does so in a beautiful, sparse prose. There is no word that should not be there. Each word seems to be carefully selected to create this beautifully crafted and intricate world that is never too much. So where do you start? Well, I personally would start with Foster, for example. Foster might be the perfect introduction to Keegan's work. It is this tender but quietly powerful story of a young girl who is sent off to live with distant relatives somewhere in Ireland. It is a story of family, of belonging, of feeling loved, but it is also one of those stories where what is not said is equally important to what is actually said. It's all about the spaces between the worlds, and it is one of those books that you will want to reread even if you just finished it. And then a bit darker is small things like these. A story of a bitter cold Christmas in Ireland in the 1980s, and we follow our coal merchant on his route. He lives in this very small town and he discovers a rather dark secret, and it is a story about moral courage, about doing the right thing. And again, the writing is beautiful in this one, and each short sentence seems to bear a certain weight on your shoulders. Especially if you know a thing or two about Irish history, then this is a book that will break your heart and piece it back together again. And if you want it even shorter, then there's always a collection of short stories. Antarctica, for example. A whole collection of short stories that only take a few pages and distill a human emotion in such a raw and beautiful and insightful way that, these stories are chef's kiss. So yeah, Claire Keegan is one of those authors who proves that stories don't have to be long to be powerful. If you're someone who values writing that is precise, rich and deeply moving, then Claire Keegan's books are truly a gift. I hope you've discovered a new author or some new books to add to your TBR. And now I want to hear from you. Who are your author-by authors? Let me know down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give that thumbs up and do subscribe for more bookish content. And if you don't necessarily agree with my author-by authors, that's fine. There are more recommendations for you, for example, in this video.